You're good. Hey, good afternoon. My name is David Potter with Americans for Limited Government. I'm with the Vice President of Public Policy, Robert Romano. We're discussing the huge landmark decision the United States Supreme Court has struck down a state law, New York state law. The case is New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen. And I'm going to give you a quick synopsis here of what the case, how it was
What the ruling
discussed.
is. Yeah, the Supreme Court ruled. Justice Clarence Thomas, he states, quote, "The constitutional right to bear arms in public for self-defense is not a second-class right subject to an entirely different body of rules than the other Bill of Rights guarantees. The exercise of other constitutional rights does not require individuals to demonstrate to government officers some special need. The Second Amendment right to carry arms in public for self-defense is no different. New York's proper cause requirement violates the 14th Amendment by preventing law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs from exercising their right to keep and bear arms." So I think this is pretty important and powerful decision, 6-3. You've got Thomas delivering the majority opinion, John Roberts, Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Barrett, they're all voting 6-3. So Rick Manning, president of Americans for Limited Government, he put out a statement today, David, that pretty much says this is it for a generation. The right to bear arms settled for a generation by Supreme Court as liberty prevails in landmark ruling. Now, he talks about a Bernie Getz case from the 1980s. This was a man who defended himself on a New York City subway car. And Rick recounts how this basically started a movement to make the right to bear arms a staple of state laws all across the country. Obviously, New York State never adopted a pro-possession because this was striking down unlicensed possession of a firearm. And so you weren't allowed to do that. You had to have a license in New York State. And what the Supreme Court says is, no, that's not true. Under the Constitution, you have a right to keep and bear arms, whether or not you have a license.
Yeah, and this is going to have huge effects for other states too. New York State, not the only state that has burdensome requirements that are anti-Second Amendment. Extra fees, huge fees, or a long process to go through to be able to carry and exercise one Second Amendment right. So this is huge across the country. Big news.
I agree. So let's see what people are saying here. We've got Ralph Bridges is giving thumbs up here. Christian Orr, that's wonderful, but will New York City, aka the Big Crapple, continue to get away with their anti-gun shenanigans, especially that ridiculous 6-month waiting period just for a permit to purchase a firearm? I don't think that's what was at issue in this case. So you have a specific law, the licensure requirement in New York State. That's what was at issue here. And so I think that is what is going to be the operative. So other requirements, like you guys have to still go and challenge those in court, I would think. But we're not practicing attorneys here, but I do think that this is an important decision nonetheless. And so we do want to see, the right to bear arms is just like the First Amendment right to speech. It is protected under the Bill of Rights, and under the 14th Amendment, the states have to abide by the Bill of Rights. And so that applies to the First Amendment, the Second Amendment in this case, the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable searches and seizures. The Fifth Amendment, due process, actually is repeated as a requirement in the 14th Amendment, that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process. And so a licensure requirement, in my view, that would probably also violate due process, because or you could deprive somebody of their right, their liberty, without any legal process that would be allowed under the Constitution. The Second Amendment says that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. And so clearly the Supreme Court, I think this is a huge a ruling. We should read from Rick's statement, though. Do you want to do that, David?
Yeah, sure. Today's Supreme Court decision is the final word.
Wait. You have to set it up. Rick Manning, president of Americans for Limited Government, today issued this following statement. Take it away, David.
Congress has taken a giant step backwards in gun ownership, but it should be paying attention as the Supreme Court has affirmed the right to keep and bear arms today. New York State puts laws into place that made it virtually impossible for the average person to legally carry a firearm without a license. And the Supreme Court today affirmed that the bearing of arms is a constitutionally protected for law-abiding citizens in a landmark decision. Now states have to provide the means in order for ordinary citizens to be able to exercise their rights.
Hey, we got Rick Manning here. Let's add him to the stream here. Let's see if he's going to be a window. We got the spinning wheel thing going on here. I don't think we're going to be able to get Rick Manning here. We're having trouble connecting with Rick Manning, president of Americans for Limited Government. He's trying to call in from his phone. He's out in California right now, but the phone's not cooperating. We'll try to get him back later, David. Let's go to some chats here. We've got DJ Arnoldo. What impact will this decision have on other no Second Amendment demo fascist states like DC and Maryland? This ruling will apply to every single state in the country. And so any licensure requirements that prevent citizens from exercising their due process rights have been struck down. Let's try Rick Manning again here. Hey, Rick, can you hear us? Hello. I don't know if he's there, but he seems to be logged in, David. He might have stepped away for a second. If he happens to jump in, we'll just kind of cut away. But I don't want to leave him in the backstage if he's trying to talk. So we do have Rick Manning available, it would appear, but he may have had his microphone muted. That's also a possibility. But if he doesn't cut in a minute, we'll just have to kick him from the stream again. Yeah, I think that the impact of this is monumental. It's going to apply to DC, to Maryland, to New York, to California, to any state that's trying to use licensure requirements for firearms to block Second Amendment rights. This will be a part of the mix now, and it's going to lock it up for a generation. The Supreme Court is 6-3 right now with Republican appointed justices, so it's going to take a really long time. There goes Rick again. Here's Carolyn Lovett. She's pleased with the Supreme Court's decision. She writes, good. This is pretty much it, David. I think that what do you suppose is going to happen when you have well, maybe I can get Rick on a speakerphone here. I don't think I should do that. We're not gonna take Rick calling me on the speakerphone right now, should we? I don't think I can get a good quality because of this microphone. I doubt we'd be able to hear him. But I'm going to go off camera for a moment, David. Go
for it.
How do I turn off the camera?
Let's see. There we are. Okay. Hey, everybody. So, yeah, just as we were discussing, this decision is huge. And I love how Justice Thomas discussed this. The constitutional right to bear arms in public for self-defense is not a second-class right, subject to an entirely different body of rules than the other Bill of Rights guaranteed. And that's what we've seen the blue states do, right? Like they've tried to subject the Second Amendment to a different body of rules. And this clarifies this decision. No, the Bill of Rights, it's not a second-class right. The Second Amendment is not a second-class right. It should be treated as the rest of the Bill of Rights. So this is great news. You know, what states will do in the future regarding, regulations, that's yet to be seen. But this is an affirmation, a huge case, one of the biggest cases in a generation. So we're very excited about this, and it's going to be, it's a big win for gun right advocates and for the Bill of Rights in general. Yeah, so that charge that resulted from New York State's gun restrictions would have been overturned by today's rulings. The case ignited debate across the country surrounding the right to bear arms, leading to the passage of dozens of laws as the state level expanding the right to carry to self-defense. While Congress, hey there, Robert.
Hello, keep going.
While Congress still hasn't figured out that hasn't still figured out that shall not infringe means what it says in the Constitution, the Supreme Court today left no doubt that law-abiding citizens have the right to carry guns to defend themselves for any other reason. Perhaps Congress will read the decision and reconsider the unconstitutional path they are following, an egregious expansion of civil asset forfeiture to confiscate firearms, a straightforward deprivation of property without due process, targeting American citizens' Second Amendment rights.
Right. So the red flag law, this is kind of like the ex-wife calling the police on the ex-husband saying, go get my husband's gun collection, my ex-husband's gun collection. Something like, I think that's what it does. Is you can basically accuse somebody of being dangerous, who may not have a history of violence or even be a, you already, because felons are already convicted felons, already barred from purchasing firearms.
Right, and a problematic, correct. And one thing that I find problematic that's missing from the text of the Senate bill that is going to be voted on again is there is no penalty specifically for misusing the red flag laws. If you fraudulently use a red flag law, it leaves it up to the states to decide, but it should be, if there's a specific mechanism to take away the firearms, at the least there should be one for someone who fraudulently uses the system, and there is not.
Right. Here's DJ Arnoldo again. Remember that to the left, there is only to fight. Dem fascists will use every dirty trick to subvert today's Supreme Court decision, taxes, red flag laws, gun-free zones, etc. Yeah, so, I mean, I think that this does settle many Second Amendment and self-defense questions, as well as licensure questions for firearms. Obviously, there's other issues surrounding, I think, self-defense and how basically guns fit in American society. They're a fixture, right? You can't really, people want to regulate this, but I think the Constitution is pretty clear. It has as much protection for the Second Amendment as it does for the First and Fourth Amendments and all of the other Bill of Rights. They're on kind of an equal plane there. That said, you're still going to have laws that obviously it's still illegal to commit murder with a firearm, right? And I think that the Gun Control Act, if you commit a felony while in possession of a firearm, I think all of those penalties still kind of stack the way they did. Although I think sentencing is a little different now than when that bill was passed back in the 60s. There's been a lot of modifications to judicial sentencing to do with, different types of mandatory sentencing. So there are probably some modifications there. I'm not as well equipped as Rick Manning would be, who has advocated on this issue for his entire career. All right, here's a good question. Glenn Fontaine, how about militias? I would say that the Second Amendment's justification that you read, a militia being a well-governed militia or well-regulated militia being necessary for keeping peace and stability or whatever in the state, that's a justification. The individual right to keep and bear arms, that was upheld in D.C. v. Heller a decade ago. So I think that we're kind of past that question. Like, is this an individual right or not? People obviously, when they wrote about militias back in the Second Amendment, that was the local fighting force for the colonies and then for the states. When you had the Insurrection Act in the early 1800s, it talked about militia, but then it was later modified to talk about the National Guard, state National Guards, and activating. When should the National Guard be activated? But that's kind of a little a field from where we're talking about here, which is an individual right to protect yourself and not to have a license in order to be able to do that. Particular to New York State's law, but it will obviously strike down other similar state laws once district courts and the circuit courts start to apply what I think you have to say is a new precedent. Although I imagine practicing constitutional attorneys will tell you what was particularly precedential about this ruling. But obviously here at Americans for Limited Government, David, we are very pleased with the outcome here. There's other, do you want to switch gears and talk about this session and kind of what the implications are of these pretty monumental rulings that are coming from the court now. It seems like they've kept their powder dry, these conservatives on the court, but suddenly they are speaking, they're saying what the law is, and it's not the way people, I think, who voted for Joe Biden want the Supreme Court to say what the law is. Marbury v. Madison, that is the court's proper role in judicial review. It's kind of implied, it's an implicit power, this Article 3 power of judicial review, very controversial throughout the entire history of the Republic because it's an implicit power. But here it is. The court is doing what Marbury says, which is to say what the law is. And the law says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Right. And I'm not sure which president before President Trump was able to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices. Maybe that's some president, maybe not. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's huge, and we can see the impacts of that. And we had Elizabeth Warren a couple months ago saying that conservatives have been setting this up for decades to have a conservative Supreme Court that would rule in such a way. And she was right about that. It has been a long time coming for the conservative court to have this kind of majority, and we're seeing the effects of it. And I think it's only really starting. Obviously, there's some other huge decisions that are we're still waiting, but this has been a long time in the making, and it's just, as you said, the impacts. It's going to be felt all throughout society as they rule constitutionally what is truth, what is abiding by the Bill of Rights, abiding by how the founders interpret how law should be.
Here, I got the list of presidents by appointments by president. Let's see. I guess George Washington holds the record. He appointed the most justices at 11 on the Supreme Court. But then you get down to Joe Biden. He's had 1. Donald Trump had 3. Obama had 2. George W. Bush had 2. Bill Clinton had 2. H.W. Bush had 2. Ronald Reagan had 4.
Wow.
Jimmy Carter didn't have any. Sorry, Jimmy. Gerald Ford had 1. Richard Nixon had 4 as well. Lyndon Johnson 2, JFK 2, Eisenhower 5, Truman 4, Roosevelt 9. So there you go.
Wow.
Franklin Roosevelt, he never actually got to expand the size of the Supreme Court, but he was president for so many years, like 20 years? He had 4 terms before he died. 9 justices on the Supreme Court. So besides George Washington, William Howard Taft 6. I want to see who has the record here. Abraham Lincoln had 5. Andrew Jackson had 5. But no, George Washington is still holds the record for the most. And considering that you have only 9 justices now, I think that record will pretty much stand unless the Democrats are going to try to pack the Supreme Court. What do you suppose are the chances that might happen, given the ruling here, and then a potential ruling on overturning Roe v. Wade is highly anticipated? That one of the last rulings before the Supreme Court breaks for the July 4th. I mean, they have the most important ruling is usually the last one to come. And so the Supreme Court asserting itself here, are they going to make a huge statement in the coming days on overturning Roe v. Wade? I think that indications are that they are heading in that direction, that potential ruling was leaked to the press. So we have no way of actually knowing. There's been threats made against Supreme Court justices since then. I think that the federal marshals have their hands full right now. People are getting charged with making threats and things like that. So I think that this is obviously a very tense situation just in terms of what the court's doing right now, because it is so monumental. It is so it's changing precedents. So I think that this is kind of turning the page on judicial precedents under the Constitution, and this session will be reverberating for years. But it also starts a countervailing force. If you think back to Roe v. Wade, if you think back to Griswold at the tail end of the 60s, and then in the early 70s, those rulings, what tends to happen is the American people tend to go with what the Supreme Court has just said. People who are in favor of those rulings were able to make a case for pro-choice that reverberated in public opinion. And it took, I think, about a decade for the pro-life movement to get its sea legs. Rick Manning, in his statement, he talks about the Bernie Getz case in the 1980s and how he was convicted of a weapons possession charge, that law would have been overturned by today's Supreme Court ruling. And think how long it took from the 1980s where that type of conviction could happen to the today where now that type of conviction can't even exist. Those laws have been struck down now. So you think of the conservative push to put constitutionalists, textualists in the mold of Antonin Scalia on the federal bench to put them on the Supreme Court. This is finally paying dividends. And so, yeah, Donald Trump had an absolute huge role in that with Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh being put on the Supreme Court at this moment. The passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think, is this is the fallout from that, and then the push for packing the Supreme Court. I think that we're going to see that push now coming from Democrats, and I think they're going to fail spectacularly at it. I think Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema have already made their views on this clear. We'll see what the political fallout is, though. I think that people who are pro-Second Amendment will probably promote this decision, and people who support the right to bear arms, they're going to say, hey, we won this case, and they're going to promote it. It's going to boost public opinion for that position. Even with the Uvalde tragedy, the shooting there, and what Congress is working on right now, Congress does need to pay attention to what the court is saying and know what the limits on their powers are. Congress
Absolutely.
has limits on its power. They're set forth under the Constitution. They are further set forth under the amendments to the Constitution, particularly the first 10, the Bill of Rights. And Congress has to abide by the Bill of Rights, or the Supreme Court's just going to be right back at them again. They're going to come right back to this situation and say, hey, you're not allowed to violate people's rights on the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, etc. And these rulings will go on. Eventually, Democrats are going to try to say, we need to have more liberal justices on the court. And they'll try to push back on this stuff. And that is absolutely a part of the process. And it's going to, I think, play a role in the midterms. Although I think people are pretty piping angry right now with the Biden administration. And so I'm not certain that the ruling here or one overturning Roe v. Wade can truly change the calculus of the midterms, which never favor the incumbent party in the White House.
I hope you're right. I think about the way that things are going with this Senate bill and the attitude of the senators, at least with the first procedural vote, those 14 senators who said, yes, we support these red flag funding for state laws. They are driving, I think, a attitude shift that may at least dampen the red wave. I still believe that the economic indicators are the biggest factor that will determine turnout. And I think turnout for Democrats, like the enthusiasm is still very low, but this is definitely going to cause less Republicans to turn out the way that the Senate is talking. Do I think the Supreme Court will be packed in the long term, or they're going to try to? Absolutely, they're going to try to, but I still think and hope that the Senate can be won. And those numbers. Does the Senate look like it will flip red? And
well, I think that's the odds that the out party, the opposition party, tends to pick up about 3 seats on average when they do pick up seats in midterm elections. Going back over 100 years. The average in the House of Representatives is about 30 seats. So just going by historical averages, Republicans are likely to reclaim the House and the Senate, but that is not a fait accompli. It's not 100% of the time you pick up seats in the midterms. It's only about 70% of the time in the Senate, and about, I think, 90+% of the time, 95% of the time in the House, you tend to pick up seats.
wow.
And in those instances where you pick up seats, you tend to pick up about 3 in the Senate and about 30 in the House. We have Lea Amorosi here. Does this address the right to bear arms daily without a permit? I do think it does. It struck down a New York state law which said you needed a license in order to possess a firearm. And the Supreme Court says, no, you don't. Jeff Haynes, when the Constitution was written, militia meant any citizen, not a particular fighting force. That's true. A well-regulated militia being necessary for security of the state, however, has no bearing on this case. That is a justification for the Second Amendment. It says, yeah, we need our citizens to be well armed so that David can go to his fireplace and pick the rifle off of the fireplace and walk outside and join General Washington's Continental Army or something like that, or join the local militia, which were supporting the Continental forces during the Revolution. That was their understanding of it at the time. Democrats like to talk about that phrase of the Second Amendment, that justification for the Second Amendment. It's a justification. DC v. Heller settles that issue. And that's a decade ago. They're expanding gun rights now, the protection thereof under Supreme Court jurisprudence by saying not only do you have the individual right to keep and bear arms under DC v. Heller, now under this New York State Rifle and Pistol Association ruling, now you have the right to do so without a license. And I think that's very, very important here. Militiaman, any citizen. Lynn Goodwin says, since red flag laws deprive individuals of due process, will this still affect states that already have red flag laws? I think it will. If the Congress passes this red flag law, it's going to change the way that is operated. I expect that to be then challenged in federal courts to the extent that it deprives people of their firearms. Like you have a confiscation, but there was no conviction of an actual crime. They just took away somebody's firearms because an angry person, could be a relative, could be a friend, could be an enemy, calls the phone on somebody else and says, oh, hey, this person's dangerous. And then they have their firearms taken away from them. You have
and the person, the firearm holder, they're financially responsible to bear their defense. That could be tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars without due process that they still have to pay that money. And if they're proven innocent, if they're proven able to bear arms, there is no issue. There's no repercussions for that money they had to spend on their defense.
Right. They'll set up a process for that, but I think it's liable to be abused. And I bet you that what's going to happen is somebody's rights that were protected under the Constitution will be violated. Federal courts will take it up and probably strike it down too. The 6-3 majority, like the court's saying, guys, don't waste your time. We're going to uphold constitutional rights, the Bill of Rights. If you don't like what the Bill of Rights says, amend the Constitution. There's a process, 2/3 of the House and Senate can amend the Constitution, put that to the states. You could also have an Article 5 convention. If they're really dedicated to this issue, I think there's a legislative solution for Democrats. Also, there is nothing that makes it so you have to have 9 justices on the Supreme Court. So I think their court packing scheme seems to be low-hanging fruit for them. We'll see if these rulings are persuasive to Joe Manchin, though. I think Joe Manchin probably supports this ruling today. He's the conservative Democrat from West Virginia. If I had to guess, he's praising the ruling, but maybe he hasn't. We shouldn't quote Joe Manchin if he hasn't praised the ruling. But I think that the politics of a state like Arizona, like West Virginia, they play an absolute role on how senators are going to move on these issues. They'll pass a red flag law, but they're not going to do anything to ban firearms. They're not going to ban the AR-15 or anything like that.
Right. It's part of the American culture, and I can't give an exact source for these numbers, but what I've heard though, Americans have collectively 400 million firearms, and all the armies of the world combined, excluding America, has 133 million firearms. It's just our culture. It's in our Bill of Rights. So to think that that's going to change anytime soon. I mean, I know there's been these infringements, these laws, but the Supreme Court just said, hey, this is our founding document. You have to listen to it. What a great victory.
Yeah. Here you have Glenn Fontaine. Does the National Guard stand for our Constitution? Yes, they have to swear an oath. Let's see here. DJ Arnoldo. All we need is 1 or 2 more constitutionalist decisions from the court, and the Dem fascists will clamor to overturn the Senate filibuster and pack the Supreme Court with America-hating leftists. I don't know if they hate America, but they will definitely try to pack the Supreme Court with liberal justices who share their philosophy of more expansive government. I think that at Americans for Limited Government, we will oppose that. Any move to pack the Supreme Court, Americans for Limited Government, we are dead set opposed to that. We've issued statements opposed to that in the past. We will remain opposed to that. I think it's dangerous. I think that, you have a pretty well-established framework for the Judicial Act. This has been since the 1860s. You've had 9 justices. So I think it will be very difficult to overturn that. That said, there could be popular opinion. You have elections. Democrats could flip the script on the midterms, break the midterm jinx. If they think this is the issue, for them. This is a once in a generation opportunity to galvanize public support for liberal justices to be on the Supreme Court. They could run on court packing, and I think they'll be probably not advantaged by doing that. I think it'll look like an insane power grab if they attempt to do that, particularly if they fail, to, out of desperation, try to change the rules, basically, right? It's like, oh, we can't win enough elections. We couldn't beat Donald Trump, who put three Supreme Court justices on the court. It's like, Trump was there. He won the election. Elections have consequences. This is the consequence. And that's sad for Democrats, I think, who feel like they had the upper hand on the Supreme Court, I think, for more than a generation, and they're watching it slip away very rapidly. And that's going to reverberate politically. It could mean that Republicans actually do better this year because people are going to be more in favor of gun rights. They're going to be more in favor of the Second Amendment. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, pro-lifers are going to promote the heck out of that ruling and say, we were right the entire time. See, the Supreme Court says we're right. And that's going to drive up public opinion, I think, for the pro-life position. That's what usually happens. We'll see how the media behaves. We'll see how the polls move. But right now, Republicans are commanding position in the midterms. They tend to be up ahead by about 3 or 4 points. That could mean that they probably take back the House and the Senate this year. The matter of degree, what is turnout going to be? What is the enthusiasm gap? How many people are angry at the Biden administration for doing nothing to solve the supply chain crisis? Or inflation still at 8+% come election day? You think Democrats are going to do well if inflation is still near double digits? What if it gets to double digits? My goodness, the supply chain crisis alone.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of reasons to say these rulings won't amount to much politically today, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you could see Democrats the pendulum start to swing the other way. They'll have to do what the Federalist Society did. They'll have to go and find their own justices. They're going to have to rebuild what they've lost here. And they better hope Joe Biden doesn't lose the next election, because if Donald Trump or whoever the Republican nominee is happens to win, they could be appointing 2 or, I don't know if those Democrats on there, they're kind of young right now. So they'll probably be there for a while.
Breyer, right?
But you have to go, how old is Kagan? I think she might be the oldest Democrat there now. And Breyer's gone now. So after this session. So I think that we're pretty much, they're Democrats. Those 3 justices will probably be locked in, but 10, 15 years from now. So you start to think about which election, but justices tend to retire before they die. I think Ginsburg, that's what Kennedy did. Ginsburg stayed on, I think, because Trump was in there. And so she maybe should have retired before Trump and tried. They didn't have the votes. They didn't have the Senate back then. So it wasn't advantageous for them to do that. When Antonin Scalia died, Republicans refused to seat that. Merrick Garland was supposed to, I think, change this outcome. And I think people are going to be more in favor on the Democratic side to pack the Supreme Court, precisely because Mitch McConnell and Senate Democrats prevented Merrick Garland from getting confirmed. That's where Gorsuch's seat is right now. That was Neil Gorsuch. So you look at where this is a 5-4 ruling, and maybe, I don't know, does Roberts go along with this? If the other 5 aren't saying we're going to do this, we are going to be a conservative Supreme Court now. We're going to be a constitutionalist Supreme Court now. I think Roberts has to acquiesce to that. That is the will of the people. And he's not. So this is 6-3. I think that's a solid majority. This is going to take a very, very long time for Democrats to overturn. I think the oldest Republican justice is Clarence Thomas. And so I think I think that you see efforts to remove him, particularly being the oldest Republican justice, appointed justice, that Democrat. And after this ruling, they're going to want to get rid of him even more, even though all he did was just read what the law says what the law is.
Right. And it really speaks to a bigger picture, the temperature of politics right now. A recent Fox poll said that the biggest issue for Americans, only 18% of Americans say it's gun control. Over 50-something% say it's the economy. And it was, what was it, President Clinton's advisor or campaign manager who said it's the economy, stupid. Like
Jim Carville.
Okay, yes, it's
they definitely had a proper read on the economy heading into the 1992 presidential campaign. George H.W. Bush was trying to get the economy out of recession. He was popular after the Gulf War, but then very unpopular during the 91 recession. That knocked him out of power. Jimmy Carter had a recession in 1980 that knocked him out of power. Gerald Ford had a recession in 1975. He lost power in 1976.
The left
I mean,
has
it's kind
misread
of a
this.
recurring theme. Herbert Hoover has the economy crash on him. The Great Depression starts while he's president. He loses power. Could Joe Biden be a one-term president because of the economy? Let's see here. We have more comments. The chat is on fire. Betsy Burns. Don't citizens all together as one group have the right to take up arms against the government that is trying to change our government? I think it's with the Declaration of Independence. It expresses a natural right to revolution. That's why it's called the American Revolution. Other philosophies, Marxists, they have a violent revolution, right to revolution, to go kill your manager or something. I think that there's a lot of advocacies for that sort of thing. Is there a legal right? Probably not. I think the Insurrection Act pretty much forbid that in the early 1800s. That's what Lincoln invoked to enforce the Civil War. As a matter of fact, the Insurrection Act it was utilized by Abraham Lincoln to enforce the Civil War. It was used by Eisenhower to enforce Brown v. Board of Education. When in Portland, when they were trying to burn down the courthouse, radicals in the street were trying to burn down a federal courthouse. ALG actually advocated for President Trump, if the governor and the mayor would not restore order in Portland, that the National Guard should be activated via the federal procedure under the Insurrection Act, as is provided for under law. So I think that I think state and local governments, the federal government, they all have a responsibility to maintain law and order. So it's an interesting question. I think that I think federal and state laws have evolved a lot since the Declaration of Independence, including the obviously no more Articles of Confederation. The Constitution intervened. You have the Bill of Rights that also amends on top of that. You have state laws that come on top of that. You have the statutes that were enacted during the first Congresses. Again, the Insurrection Act goes all the way back to 1800. You can look it up. I'm in New York, says Lea Amorosi. Well, congratulations to New York. This is, I think, a big victory for New Yorkers, as well as all American citizens who like the right to keep and bear arms being upheld. GJ Arnoldo, Glenn, like all soldiers, National Guardsmen take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of their state from all enemies, foreign and domestic. I think that settles that question. DJ, Roger on that, Robert. West Virginia culture is gun culture. Yeah. So Joe Manchin, you think he's going to want to abolish the filibuster so Democrats can pack the Supreme Court and overturn the Second Amendment without passing any laws, without amending the Constitution? No, I think he's going to think that's a rotten idea. I think that this filibuster is probably safe this year. Biden's legislative agenda, it's dead. This gun control bill that they're doing right now, the red flag law. I mean, the only thing that's surprising is how little it does in that capacity. We oppose it. Make no mistake, because Congress should oppose this. Biden, if it passes, should veto it. That is Americans for Limited Government's position. But a lot of votes this year, and I think this is true, David. In election years, a lot of congressional votes are, I don't want to say it's a show vote. It's not a show vote. But it's risk aversion. Republicans who are voting for this, they're afraid that if they don't vote for it, we're going to lose the midterms. I say it makes no difference. The cake is cooked. Whatever's in the oven, voter attitudes have already, the pie's already in the oven. It's already baked. Voter attitudes have already set in. The midterm red wave is probably inevitable, just like the recession Biden says isn't.
I think you're right. And let's see if this doesn't cut us off. If you haven't already, head over to getliberty.org. You're going to see a banner in the middle of the page, a button rather. It says stop the red flag laws. Go click on that and email your senators, because it's still not too late. They voted on the first procedural vote, but now that the Supreme Court has ruled shall not means shall not, and that senators have also had time to read the text of this bill and learn about the unintended consequences, it's not too late to stop this unconstitutional red flag bill, by the way. So yeah, if you haven't already, head over to getliberty.org, click on that button and email your senators right now.
Cool. All right, let's see here. Gun culture. Here we go. Here's Lea Amorosi. Americans will defend their country from both foreign and domestic enemies. Adam Nash, will the Alito opinion be read by you guys or no? It's not Alito. It's Justice Thomas. We have that. I think we have that. If you can pull that up, David, we wanted to read this particular section here. Oh, that was it. You had it. There it is. The constitutional right to bear arms. This is Justice Clarence Thomas delivered the majority opinion here. Constitutional right to bear arms in public for self-defense is not a second-class right subject to an entirely different body of rules than the other Bill of Rights guarantees. The exercise of other constitutional rights, like the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, etc., Fifth Amendment, does not require individuals to demonstrate to government officers some special need. So the licensure requirement, you don't need a license to have the right to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment. You have that right no matter what, just like the right to freedom of speech, the right to write anything you want on a piece of paper, the right to press, the printing press. It's the right to the printing press, not some elite cabal in the White House press corps. No, the freedom of the press is the freedom of the printing press. And everyone has that right as long as you are an American citizen with that right and you have a printing press. If you have the right to bear arms, you have the right to keep and bear arms if you own a firearm. That's it. That's all.
We were born
You have
with
a gun.
Right.
You're an American. You are protected. So here's, I'm just telling you what this right means. The exercise of other constitutional rights does not require individuals to demonstrate to government officers some special need. The Second Amendment right to carry arms in public for self-defense is no different. New York's proper cause requirement violates the 14th Amendment by preventing law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs from exercising their right to keep and bear arms in public. I think that is unequivocal ruling from the Supreme Court, 6-3. So yes, we are going to read the Thomas ruling in the New York State. We have to memorize this. The New York State Rifle and Pistol Association ruling. It's a mouthful. Peanut 3050. The local sheriff says you only get 4 tries to qualify for a permit. Is this a possible infringement now? Yes. Yes, it is an infringement. The licensure requirements that are being struck down here, I'm certain that states will attempt to make it so that, they didn't mean this type of gun licensure restriction, and then lower courts will eventually start upholding the precedent that's been set today, and you're going to have to play whack-a-mole in the federal courts. I know, oh my goodness, we have to go back to court again. Yeah, that's the American system. This is the Constitution. 3 branches of government, co-equal. They check and balance each other. They go back and forth. The executive oversteps. The legislature intervenes. The executive breaks the law. The judicial branch strikes down that. The Congress passes a bad law. The judicial branch strikes that down. Congress tries to pass a bad law. The president vetoes it. Congress overturns it, the veto. And then, all of these things, obviously, we support the Constitution. That is what Americans for Limited Government is all about. The Constitution is the limit on power. And we have to uphold that. And that's what the court's application of the law, that is their power to apply the law. Biden wants their guns, however. He doesn't want the Supreme Court to apply the law, does he, David?
No, he does not. He is all for restricting our constitutional rights. His rhetoric has been that way. American energy being American security and restricting that. So many ways he has shown a disregard to the Constitution and really the well-being of the American people, not just with regards to weapons, but I think about all the pieces you've written regarding just our energy security and the lack of production of oil. It's insane. He's been horrible for America.
Biden is doing a terrible job. It reflects in his public opinion polls. We just ran a piece, 67% of Americans disapprove of his handling of the economy. You think this guy's a potential one-term president or what? Except to say that, he had doing what they did to boost turnout via mail-in ballots, unprecedented turnout in 2020. Joe Biden will be very difficult to unseat. Incumbent presidents, just as opposition parties have the advantage in midterm elections, everyone's predicting a Republican win in 2022. You might also, for similar reasons, predict the Democrats hold the White House. That's your default position. Presidents who run for re-election, they get reelected about, 70% of the time. I think it's about three out of four, something like that. Or
let's see when the
70
recession occurs, if it is going to occur, which it overwhelmingly
seems very, very likely.
Yeah.
And if not this year, definitely next year. That would be my prediction. Well, you can hold me accountable to that. Be like, Robert, there was no recession. You were wrong. You can tell me, come back and make fun of me. Robert's prediction of a recession was totally wrong. Unemployment stayed really low. Inflation restored to normal. Biden solved the supply chain crisis. Oh, who am I kidding? He's not going to do any of those things.
He's not good.
The CJ Arnoldo, the bigger surprise to me, Robert, is that 14 rhino traders supported this gun control abomination. It's not surprising. It's risk aversion. It's an election year. And they're going to pass the buck around and try to wipe their hands clean of anything that is controversial. They're politicians. And so I think that is their natural instinct. Unfortunately, one perverse outcome of the Supreme Court's ruling today is that people will vote for these things and say the court will take care of this later. They will undo my error today. I know what I'm doing is wrong, and I will vote for it anyway, because the courts will rescue my poor political decision making, short-term, short-sighted. This is why the Constitution is the bellwether. This is why the Constitution must be the guiding light for all legislators. If you know that a law is unconstitutional and it would infringe even a little bit of the right to keep and bear arms, and you're a congressman, you're supposed to vote no. This is not rocket science. If they try to create a bill that makes it so the government can spy on you without a warrant, you should vote no, because the Constitution says you're supposed to vote no. Now, it doesn't say you must vote no. It actually gives Congress power to pass any law they want, as long as it's signed by the president. But don't be surprised when courts step in and ultimately do the right thing, as they've done today. In this ruling, Glenn Fontaine says, great job today. Thank you, Glenn. Thanks for being in the chat, everybody. Kathleen Monaghan. It doesn't matter what they rule. You submit an application to the police department and they bury it. Yeah, that's what this just got struck down today. Your whole, I got to go get a license. You already have a gun. So this might apply to somebody who's pulled over, right? Or you had stop and frisk in the 90s. You can't be charged with unlicensed possession anymore. Does that overturn all the licensure? I think it does. We'll see how New York State tries to skate around that, though. I bet you they try to still do it. In some other capacity, by local municipalities might try to do something about it. So yeah, local sheriff's departments, police departments, I think they're going to try to get around today's ruling and to use similar types of restrictions. If not licensure, they'll find something else. CE says, hello, USA gun owners. Yes, hello. Thanks for tuning in today. I think we're pretty much done here, David. Do you want to take us out of here? I think this is a very important ruling. I think Rick Manning is right. ALG president, this will be felt for a generation. Democrats got a lot of work to do. They're going to be very disappointed, I think, with the further rulings that are going to be coming down just in a few days, that are going to probably change the political landscape in the United States for the next 20, 30 years, perhaps.
Absolutely. This decision is a once-in-a-generation impact decision regarding the Second Amendment. And be hopeful for America. Be hopeful for a limited government perspective of upholding the Constitution, because we're seeing progress. We see things that are a step backwards, but this is definitely 2 steps forward today. So be hopeful, be thankful for that. We're grateful you joined us. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, click that subscribe button below and head over to getliberty.org as well to sign this, to email your senators and tell them you do not want red flag gun laws. And again,
here we got Kathleen Monaghan. One more. I don't have a gun, but I know people who tried to get a permit. And yeah, their rights have been upheld today. I don't know, in this specific case, that they're having trouble getting a permit, they should go try again. Everyone who's been denied their rights because, I couldn't get a license, go and try again. The Supreme Court just said you're allowed to keep and bear arms. Again, the court says what the law is. And again, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications. And again, that this shall not be infringed, Congress. That's
Tell
it.
them the Supreme Court sent you.
Yeah, right? Have a good day.